as I was going through researching to write the first paper, I then learned, I didn't know this, or I probably wouldn't have gone to law school, but knowing what I know now, I would go to law school if I wanted to be a lawyer. So it's not to discourage people, but there had been a Johns Hopkins study a few years earlier in 1990 surveying 104 occupations for major depressive disorder, and lawyers came in first. Highest incidence of major depressive disorder among all the 104 occupations. I didn't know that, but that certainly substantiated what the Beck and Benjamin's study showed. So I wrote that first paper, and then I put a little footnote in there that I would like to research this, because I thought this needed more research, because in the Beck and Benjamin paper, they had some speculations about how law school might be contributing to this. They did, and everything they said, it turned out to be right as far as I can tell. Even Andy Benjamin with another researcher, I think Sales, he may have been with Beck actually, getting my names, because one is Sales, one is Sales. But back in the 80s, he had done an earlier piece on depression rising in law students during law school at another public university, different region and so forth. But it's turning out everything's about the same most everywhere. And he had some speculations in there that have all turned out to be correct as far as I can tell. Of course, he's a clinical psychologist as well as a lawyer, so he should know. And he was doing the research, so I have tremendous respect for him. And actually, before I decided to do my first actual empirical research with a psychologist, I called Andy Benjamin, and we had couple of long talks. He was so helpful and encouraging about here's how we did it, and you have to watch out for, students are too busy, they won't respond, and all the things. So it really helped us to be successful from the get-go with our research. But I really, my instinct about it, having had the psychology background, much softer than Benjamin's clinical background, was that it was a self-esteem issue for law students and lawyers. That somehow they're either coming in with low self-esteem, which I never really believed, but I thought it's possible, or somehow their self-esteem is dropping during law school, and they just don't feel good about them. So that's what I was seeing in my student that day long ago that made me jump up and say, hey, look, here's this scale and self-esteem's up here. Are you there, or where are you? So that was my instinct. I think that's turned out to be true, although not the main story. It's related to the main story. But from that, the next thing that happened was I got that paper published. I felt pretty good about it because I got something published. The dean felt good about it. He thought, I'm never getting a paper out of this guy, and he did. So it was a win-win situation, pretty funny in a way. Then I decided, okay, so I kept talking more and more conferences, more presentations. At this time, I also had started doing lawyer CLEs, actually way back, probably in the mid-90s, once I saw that Journal of Law and Health piece with the lawyer dysfunction. I started doing a lot of lawyer CLEs. The Florida Bar, I spoke nearly every year at the major annual meeting at the Florida Bar for different committees, and local bar associations all over the place, different states. I went to, remember the Mississippi, their state conference one year. And I was getting the same response from the lawyers that I got from the law students and the teachers at the educational conferences, which makes a lot of sense, and this is our problem. Nobody ever said, no, you're wrong. I won't say nobody, because a few people would sort of, the body language, and that's okay. But nobody ever said, you're wrong and here's why, or really refuted any of the research or any of the logic or any of the observations that people make as lawyers, as law teachers, or as law students. Not everybody buys it, of course. But I was doing a lot of these talks for lawyers, and then I decided, you know, I'm really going to try to research this now, because everybody I talked to, it seemed to make sense. It was holding up. In a way, I was testing my own thinking. Is this crazy? Or is something really needs to be worked on here? And it turned out it wasn't crazy, as far as I could tell. So then I said, okay, well, let's research it, because nobody's going to listen unless we get some research. Because what do? I mean, it doesn't really help to go around and say, oh, everybody's depressed. I wasn't depressed. When I was a lawyer, I was borderline. I really liked my work. I was fortunate to have work I just loved. I was a criminal prosecutor for a while, with a big settlement bent, it turns out. I got a lot of settlements, which maybe we can talk about later, but just instinctively I had a sense for, I think, what was fair and what needed to be done. So it made the job more fulfilling. Most of it was done through consent. And then I got that job chasing big fraudulent schemes around the state of Florida. It was huge fun, even though a lot of the stories were really sad, but at least you get to try to do something. So, you know, all those jobs were great, but I thought nobody's going to listen, other than these people are self-selecting that are coming to these meetings, unless we have some research. And besides, what are they listening to? Everything's bad. That doesn't help anybody. So how do we fix it? We need to figure out why. And I had this little inkling about the self-esteem thing. I think that's why. Let's look at that. So I decided, well, I need to find somebody who knows how to do good research, because I sure don't. You know, I know what it looks like, but I sure can't do it. And actually, I talked to Susan Dykoff about that, who I know is another one of your people, and she has a master's, and she was kind of thinking the same thing, and I thought, well, maybe she could help me, because she had a master's. I only had the bachelor's in biology. You know. But her focus was in different areas, and I needed some of this life quality research, if there was some. What makes for life quality? Sort of more on the positive side of psychology than what makes you sick. So I was stumped for a while. I was asking around the psychology department here at FSU, anybody can research self-esteem for me if I give you some samples before and after, nice longitudinal studies, and I just wasn't coming up with anything. Then one day I saw an article in the New York Times, of all places, right here in the faculty lounge, cover story of a feature section, or one of the main sections of the Times. It was all about this new crazy man who was the new president of the American Psychological Association, named Marty Seligman, with this wild thing called positive psychology. So I read this article in the New York Times. It was a full page of the Times, which is a lot of print, and then it went on to another page, as I recall, about Marty Seligman, and they call him Mike Csikszentmihalyi, then at the University of Chicago, who does all the work on flow. And those two together it seemed like were collaborating, or just coincidentally their work was coinciding to create a sort of a positive psychology movement, which seems like, even though a lot of people don't want to admit it, was coming right out of Maslow and Rogers and those humanists. But they really wanted to give it a strong empirical spin.